Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, one of those topics you might have thought about, but maybe never really dug into. That specific psychological pull towards people who smoke. If you've ever felt that curiosity, you're definitely not alone, and you're in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we jump into, the why of desire, we really have to state the obvious, like the source material does. We all know the clinical facts. Health bodies like the CDC are very clear. Smoking is the top cause of preventable disease, full stop. But that's not quite what we're dissecting today. We're looking at human psychology, sociology, desire. It often runs on a completely different track from the hard facts. Our aim here is simply to understand the attraction itself.
Exactly. Clinical reality acknowledged. So now let's kind of peel back the curtain. What's really going on psychologically? What are the blueprints for this attraction? And importantly, how might that understanding translate into, well, strategy?
Well, what's really fascinating and maybe a bit surprising is that a lot of this attraction is grounded in some pretty fundamental human science. Things like homophily and assortative mating. Basically, putting it simply, we're wired, both genetically and psychologically, to be drawn to people who kind of mirror our own choices, our background, our attitudes. We seek out people who make us feel validated.
Okay, but hang on. If smoking rates have plummeted, right,
Yeah.
like you said, from over 40% back in 65 down to, what, under 12% now, doesn't that kind of weaken the similarity argument? Isn't it less about being like everyone else now?
But that's exactly the twist. Because it's not mainstream anymore, that shared habit.
Yeah.
It actually becomes a much, much stronger signal, a tribal marker, if you will. The rarity amplifies the signal of similarity. You're not just drawn to a habit, you're drawn to someone you perceive as part of your specific, maybe even slightly outsider subculture.
Right, right. And that cultural coding. Wow, it has deep roots. We're talking nearly a century deep. We're still kind of living with the echoes of Edward Bernays' big 1929 campaign, branding cigarettes as torches of freedom. Just think about how powerful that was. Totally reframed smoking, especially for women, tying it to independence, emancipation, style.
Exactly. And if you connect that to the bigger picture today, even with all the public health efforts to, denormalize smoking, that original code, rebellion, defiance, maybe even a bit of glamour, it still lingers culturally. It's potent. Often the attraction isn't even really to the smoking itself, but to what it signals. Perceived confidence, pushing boundaries, a sort of disregard for what everyone else thinks, especially now that it's frowned upon.
Okay, so the why is tied up in rebellion, subculture, perceived confidence. Got it. So how does this translate into the how? How do you actually, act on this understanding strategically?
Well, this is where environment becomes absolutely critical. Success really hinges on picking the right setting. You need a place where smoking isn't just allowed, but is actually sort of central to the social dynamic.
So you mean like strategically choosing your location?
Precisely. Think about the difference between, say, a high-end cigar lounge, very focused connoisseurship, quality signaling, versus maybe the patio of a pub or the beer garden at a live music venue. Those outdoor spots often become their own little social club, much more energetic, chaotic maybe. The vibe dictates everything.
And the smoke break itself is almost like a built-in social lubricant, isn't it?
It's more than lubricant, it's a social filter. Think
Yeah.
about it. Everyone's kind of pushed together, often in a slightly designated, maybe even slightly stigmatized area. It creates this instant us, this in-group bonded by the shared habit, the shared identity, even the shared stigma. And that dramatically lowers the usual barriers to starting a conversation.
Makes sense. Less awkwardness, maybe. So you're in the right spot. You see someone. How do you actually connect? How do you stand out?
Right, because just being there isn't enough. Rapport. It demands really listening, but listening contextually. Understanding that the way someone smokes, their choice of cigarette or cigar, that's actually their opening statement. And here's where it gets interesting. The source suggests a counterintuitive approach often works best.
Counterintuitive. How?
Forget the big bravado, the super smooth lines. Instead, try shared, lighthearted vulnerability, like maybe making a self-deprecating joke about your lighter not working or fumbling with the pack. It sounds weird, but it shows confidence through not needing to be perfect. It lowers their guard immediately because it's relatable, maybe even a bit endearing. Shared absurdity.
Okay, I can see that. Less pressure. So you make the connection. Then what? Is it all just about the smoking?
No, absolutely not. That's just the opening. The source frames the habit as potentially a useful litmus test for figuring out deeper compatibility.
A litmus test. How so?
Well, you observe why or how they smoke. Is it clearly linked to stress relief? Is it purely social? Does it seem tied to a creative identity, maybe someone who enjoys the nightlife?
Ah, okay, so you use that observation.
Exactly. You use that insight to pivot the conversation. Move away from the habit itself and towards shared values or interests suggested by the habit. Maybe you both value winding down after work, or you share an interest in the arts, or enjoy the same kind of nightlife. That's where the real connection starts.
So the initial attraction, the science bit with homophily, that gets your foot in the door, basically.
Precisely. The science validates the initial pull, but the ultimate goal, as the source emphasizes, is always intimacy, real connection. The habit is a signal, yeah, a powerful one, indicating a certain lifestyle or attitude, but the real work, the real potential, lies in exploring the actual person behind that signal.
Okay, so wrapping this up for you listening, what's the takeaway? The cigarette, or the cigar, can be a really clear signal. It signals a shared attitude, maybe a shared subculture, and it definitely creates an opportunity and opening for approach in certain contexts. The key is to recognize that signal, approach respectfully, use that shared context smartly, but then pivot. Pivot quickly to build something more substantial, something real that goes beyond the smoke itself.
And maybe a final thought for you to consider, something the source material touched on. Market research actually identified different smoker profiles, like the live for the moment impulsive type versus maybe the more centering self reflective type. So next time you're observing this, maybe think about how a person smokes, their style, their pace, the context. Could that be a clue to what fundamental life values they prioritize? Something to mull over.